Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast. Believe it or not, this is episode 99 and I can hear the audience going ooh in the background as I say that. We're nearly there. So episode 99, and this is one of those special ones where we have a guest with us. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Dave Christie. Hello, Dave.
Thank you. Well, I'm very pleased to be here.
Thanks for coming in, travelling all the way to Shrewsbury.
All the way from Cheshire.
From Cheshire, yeah, our neighbouring county. Come and have a chat with us. And Dave's here this morning to talk about coaching and mentoring from a couple of different angles, really. Either doing it for yourself or maybe providing it for one of your employees or one of your team. So that's going to be interesting. It's a subject that I've sort of been quite interested in, but have a layman's understanding of some of it. And I get dragged into being a quasi, I don't know which it is, coach or mentor in some of the work that we do in our business advice. So I'm looking forward to this. Just before we start, as ever, and time-honoured tradition dictates, I will list off our previous recent episodes in case you've scrolled down the list and found this one and you fancy looking up some of the others. So episode 98, last week's one, we had a bit of fun. We were starting to predict what might the workplace look like in December 2025, only 1 year away from recording. So if you're watching this episode in December 25, you can either have fits of laughter as you think of our fanciful dreaming was a bit off, or amazement that we were able to predict the future so presciently. So that was last week's. In episode 97, we talked about the business model canvas. If any of you haven't come across that before, that's a great introduction to the subject, almost a one-pager business model for most businesses to benefit from, both startups and existing businesses. So thoroughly recommend that one. And episode 96 before that was about personalization. How far should you go in personalizing your whole customer journey, your quotes, even the service delivery? And quite a few interesting points came out of that too. So they were our most recent 3 episodes. But as I say, back to today, episode 99, and Dave's here to talk to me about coaching and mentoring. And you are a coach / mentor, or a coach and a mentor. You do both.
Both, yes. I guess coach and mentor. Mm-hmm. The qualifications we do is in coaching and mentoring. So We'll go with that one.
Okay, coaching and mentoring. So I've got to start off then. What do you understand as the difference? What's the difference between a coach and a mentor, or is it the same thing? Are they just two different words?
Well, I'm going to throw that back to you because I have a really good understanding, I'd hope. But I'm always interested to think what other people think coaching and mentoring is and the difference of, because everyone's got a different interpretation. So
I love it. He's being a coach. You see that? See what we did there? What do you think? I'll tell you then, on condition that you give me your expert view afterwards and we can compare notes.
Feels reasonable.
All right. So my understanding is that a coach is something you certainly have to be qualified to do if you're going to do it well, whereas a mentor is perhaps someone who doesn't need a mentoring qualification, even if such a thing exists. It's more just born about through their experience. And I suspect that a coach is able to help lots of different people in all sorts of different circumstances because the techniques read across. It's helping someone help themselves. Whereas I get the sense, and maybe coaches don't give answers, they help you find your own. Whereas I sense that mentors use a lot more of their own personal experience and their own journey to pass on some tips, and therefore do sometimes come up with some of the answers, or at least how they would have found them, rather than just getting the coachee to come up with their own. How wide of the mark is that?
I think that you're in the right ballpark, absolutely, but I do think it differences from different people. Right. So I think that there is a qualification in mentoring. So the ILM qualifications are in coaching and mentoring. Yep. So as you go through the different subject titles, you can look at coaching and mentoring from different perspectives and look at it more strategically. Yeah, I think you're right, though. Coaching is around coaching a scenario, coaching a skill, coaching the person, not the problem. Yeah. And mentoring is more of that role model type scenario that we all think. I think actually when you look back, you've probably had a lot of mentors, even if you didn't realise you did.
You called them out at the time, they just happened to mentor you in their natural conversations.
Absolutely. I had a mentor when I worked at a pharmaceutical company. I didn't know it at the time, but actually it wasn't until I went on my first training course on that road to becoming a qualified coach that when I looked back, I thought, actually, they were mentoring me at the time. Right, yeah. And sometimes I don't even realise it. It's just you're learning from them.
Is it a bit like taking someone under your wing? Is that the sort of...
Yeah, I guess that's the same kind of terminology around it. It's actually normally somebody that you look up to and think, that's maybe someone I aspire to be like, or somebody that's really accredited in their field, or something that you might just look at and want to understand a little bit more about how and why they do what they do, the way they do it.
And do you think choosing a mentor is something that sort of happens naturally, or can you appoint someone to be a mentor and then they adopt the role, having been told to, as opposed to just sort of naturally doing it?
Again, I think there's options for both. My current mentor, I reached out to her via LinkedIn. I'd been following her on LinkedIn for a while. She was quite inspiring as what she had done and the path that she had chosen, and it mirrored somewhere that I was looking to try and get towards. Yeah. So I reached out, and she'd not been a mentor before. Was quite taken aback by it. And
Must be quite flattered to be asked.
I think it always is. Even for me now, even if it's in a paid role, when people choose me, that's a responsibility. And I think as well as flattery, and that kind of, perhaps we'll touch on that a little bit later, is actually there's a responsibility that comes with being a mentor as well.
Yeah, no, I remember when I was a young engineer, my degree is engineering, and if you're going to follow the chartered engineering route, you get a mentor appointed to you to help you through the chartering process. And I felt it very artificial. It's not someone who I would necessarily have chosen to be a mentor. It was just someone else who was already a chartered engineer and sort of helped you navigate the process. And it kind of put me off the idea of mentoring for a while. It was only later in life that I realised there were lots of other people that, like you were saying, I was being mentored by without really realising it. They weren't calling it that. We weren't having structured sessions around it. But they'd be helping me out, keeping me like the bumper guards on the bowling alley, just nudging me back into the right line and helping like that.
I think that story resonates really quite a lot with a lot of people that I speak with as well, that they've had an experience of a coach or a mentor that wasn't necessarily a great experience for them. And it's like a drink. You offered me a drink this morning. If you were to offer me one and I didn't like it, and you offered me the same thing again, I'm more than likely to say no thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
And no matter what you say around it. So that's an obstacle that we have to overcome as well when you haven't necessarily had a great experience like that. How do you define what that good and bad experience was from your perspective from a mentor?
Well, I guess I just went through the motions of it, but I didn't get from it what I now understand that perhaps I could have done if it had been someone else. But it doesn't really matter because other people were around doing it. They just weren't called the mentor. So maybe they didn't get the credit for it. Not that that really matters, but there were other people. And I remember a chief exec in the past when I was the director of a European organisation who absolutely helped me enormously and really just sort of took me to one side maybe after meetings and said, did you see what happened there? Or when you said that and I said this is why, and that's what, and it helped me to fill the jigsaw pieces together. So I've had a few, I suppose mostly bosses that have done it. They've helped me on my career in my early days when I was in manufacturing and helped me to grow and get those next promotions and move on to the next site and that sort of thing. I don't think I've ever experienced someone offline, someone who wasn't in the chain of command helping me from the side, which is more what you do, isn't it? And more what we would think of now, I suppose, as a coach or mentor. It wouldn't necessarily be your boss. It would almost be deliberately someone who isn't your boss. That's the whole point. Take that career development, professional development away from the hierarchy.
And I think it's also around facilitating the right environment as well. Especially in roles, you're taught how to do your job, and then you're given some more money, and then you're taught how to do your job better or faster or more. Yeah. You're never really taught how to coach. So people get put into roles of leadership, but don't know who they are as a leader, full stop, let alone how they can best serve somebody else. So they draw on their knowledge and their experience. Whereas actually, as you've kind of mentioned there, when you get higher up, you get to a position where you're allowed to have an executive coach, or you go through some executive coaching, and that allows you to see things from a different perspective. So it is normally the people at the top that then disseminate that down. Yeah, we're starting to see more people bring coaches in from the outside and look at it from a different perspective, but you have to have that coaching mentality. Because otherwise it's, I don't want anyone coming into my business. Yeah, is that
interesting that? Is that something that's just changing over time, or is it a generational thing? Or is it just that some people view bringing in coaches and mentors and executive coaches as a little bit new age or a bit of a failing on their part, whereas others see it as an essential and healthy ingredient as part of an organisation? What's the difference? Why do some people see it one way and one the other?
Ego, normally.
Really,
I think a lot of it's around ego, of understanding who's this person to come in. Why would I want someone to come in and tell me what to do? And we still live in a world where, for a large proportion of people, having a coach is seen as a sign. Oh, you want me to have a coach? Oh, that's a negative thing.
Okay.
Oh, what have I done wrong? Tell me, And then they come into that process of, I don't even know why I need a coach. I don't even know why I'm here. Really.
Do you get people saying that in your first sessions?
We do like a discovery call as that kind of first session, and then we try and work through what they want to get out of the sessions and what they're looking forward to, maybe some of the initial problems or some of the goals they might want to set for it. Yeah. And a lot of the time that comes in, well, I'm just coming here because I've been told to come here. I'm not even
I
sure
don't know why I'm
what
here.
Doing here. But in essence, that's an answer in itself. Yeah. If you're not self-aware enough to understand that everybody can benefit from a coach to help you bring it out, even from going to the gym and having a PT, or look at any sports person that's ever been around, and some of the leaders across the world all have a coach because they see things from a different perspective. Then you're like, okay, I've got a starting point now.
Yeah, good. So let's imagining our listener, hello listener or viewer out there, you're a owner or manager of a business. And let's say they've got past that first hurdle because they've got a few minutes into this podcast for a start and they haven't turned off thinking that's a load of, bunkum. So they're maybe interested in the idea of exploring executive coaches, mentors, whatever, for the first time professionally for someone in their team or maybe for themselves. What's a good way of identifying those that would be good candidates to be coached or mentored? What is it about their behavior, their experience, or how would you pick someone to coach or mentor?
It's almost sometimes better to start with who not to pick, and actually looking at the people that are very set in their ways. Some people have people within their businesses that are go-getters. They're out there, they're absolutely nailing what they do, and they think, that we'll take them and we'll give them a coach because that might make them better. But actually, it might well not. Because actually what might happen is you're changing the dynamics of who they are. They might have that ego that is attached with that, and we all have ego to a degree. So actually it's the people that are asking the questions. It's the people that are always asking the questions, someone that's got their hand up, somebody that's inquisitive, showing signs that they want to grow and develop. But I think take a step back from that, and it's around, sometimes you don't see the people. So if you're thinking around as a first stage, I would just look around your organisation and at yourself and start to look for and maybe even mark down on a daily basis, because you start to create that habit of who's someone that is inquisitive, who's going that little bit above and beyond, who's curious, and because you can't be what you can't see. So a general sweep of a business, you might think, those are the two people that would all, because they're the loudest in the room, but actually not necessarily. Sometimes it's the introvert, sometimes it's other people within there, and also ask.
Yeah,
I think when we look at thinking who might be the right person, ask, be open. We're creating environments for learning.
Do you think if you are in the habit of doing at least an annual performance review or professional development review, and maybe even more frequent, some people do monthly one-to-ones, do you think it's a reasonable thing to include in that discussion across the board then? Just to say, by the way, we're thinking of including a little bit of coaching and mentoring as part of our management development or whatever it may be. Is that something you'd be interested in? Or do you feel actually you just get everybody forcibly saying yes because they can't imagine saying no? It's the wrong environment.
You've been in quite a few meetings where that has happened. Then I've had a little goal this year of trying to eradicate the phrase "Does that make sense?" It's a very similar philosophy around. Everyone just says yes, that makes sense. They go, any questions? Everyone goes, no questions, and then no one does anything because they will walk out of the room and go, What did he mean?
So more of an open question then.
So I think it's definitely about open questioning, and I think questioning is the real thing. Asking questions is a talent. And I think that the sequencing of questions is something that we don't necessarily think around. So sometimes we just go straight in, like going into anything and walking into the office, just going straight into a spreadsheet. You don't. You need to build yourself into what you're going to do. You need to set your environment, set yourself up for success. So if you are looking to create a coaching environment, it's knowing the type of questions, asking them what areas what their interests are, or where do they see themselves in 6 months, or what's holding them back currently. Perhaps what's taking up most of their time within their day-to-day, or the one I like most, if I could take one thing away from you that would allow you to be better at your role, what would it be?
Right. And is that you as a coach talking, or is that what the manager or owner of a business might say as part of their teeing up the idea?
That's the manager of the business. I think it's enabling the right level of question to then say, okay, now rather than saying we're looking to do a coaching and mentoring, as you said, and everyone just says, oh, well, I better say yes because they're putting it on. It's actually being able to say, to create the environment to say, that's really interesting. We're working with somebody at the moment that can help support in those areas. We'd love to support you in your journey, and making it around the person rather than you as the business. So that we come at it from a different way, a different angle.
Do you often get situations where the individual has spontaneously asked for coaching and mentoring without, even though it hasn't been blindly offered, like you just said there, in a blunt way, but you've still introduced the subject, we're working with someone, maybe, blah, blah. Do you think often people are brave enough to just ask for it?
Very rarely. Very rarely. I said there's still that stigma attached around if I need a coach. It's like saying...
It's an admission of failure of something.
Yeah, I just want to let you know I can't do my job. That's how people see it. And actually, it comes with the environments and the culture that's being created. Sometimes you do.
It's natural. Even business owners, we find that when we do a lot of non-exec director work, and it's the same, almost that same feeling that there's an admission. Why do I need someone from the outside coming in? I'm being paid to do this on my own, and it must be the same then at the employee level. You think if I ask for that support, maybe because I'm failing in some way.
Even working your way up through the board as well, at all levels, nobody wants to put their hand up and feel like someone's going to judge them. How we perceive other people think about us is really important to us. From what we wear to how we dress to what we say to what we don't say.
So if it's not generally asked for, let's say spontaneously like that, imagine a scenario where somebody in the business is getting some coaching through however that's come about, maybe even a rather ham-fisted, blunt, do you want some coaching? Someone's getting it. Do you then find that their peers or others in the organisation are then braver to ask for it because it's now accepted? Someone's broken the mould.
Yeah, I think it's the same with anything. If you get a good review in a restaurant, you're more likely to go to that restaurant. So yes, if they're getting good levels of coaching and people are seeing an improvement, then yes, we do tend to find that when you started one, I think not just for that individual, but also for the business as a whole, when they start seeing the benefits and that the employee increasing in their awareness or taking on extra projects, they can see how it might filter across the team. We're starting then to create a coaching culture where people are looking for areas to develop.
Yeah. Now, I know of some organisations where they have one particular coach that goes in maybe once a month or so and sees a few different members of the team on the same day, not at the same time, but on the same day. While they're on site, it's just cost efficient to do that. But it means they're picking up incredibly rich information, which they have to keep confidential because of the nature of the coaching relationship. But it puts them in a position where they could probably fix a lot of the senior level problems because they can then see really what everyone thinks about what and what the solutions are. And it sort of frustrates me on their behalf that you are sitting on such a goldmine of potential solutions here and you're not allowed to share them. How do you ever do you have to just bottle that up and think, well, that's the way it works? Or are there ways that you can sort of help through coaching of the senior person, having met all their team? Is that doable, or is that just one of those sort of
First of all, it's good to get that insight from it as well, because I don't often see that insight from this side round. It is doable, and it is frustrating simultaneously. But actually, that contracting phase right at the beginning, that the person that you're coaching knows that information isn't going to go any further is imperative for two sides. One, when coaching becomes more consultancy and they try and get you to ask you to do things, you can come back to the boundary setting at the beginning. Right. But two, if you think that I'm going to run off to your line manager and tell them everything, why would you tell me anything?
No, stop. Yeah.
Or what you are going to tell me is going to be a version, watered down or sometimes strengthened up,
embellished,
to make sure that if anything's going back, I want a good report going back, because that scorecard going home at the end of school term kind of thing. So actually creating that environment is important. However, there is also that piece at the beginning that says what I will be talking around is any overall areas within the business that I think the business can develop on. So if I'm seeing a pattern through 2 or 3 people, I might suggest you need some communication training, or you might need some accountability workshops, or
without naming
suggest names. Them. So you don't suggest so-and-so has raised it, but you might say generically we're seeing a trend.
So you have a channel in a way to the procuring manager, not the coachee, to say that there are some themes here that you might want to consider. You would feel okay going back yourself as opposed to trying to empower those you're coaching to go and suggest that.
Sometimes it happens naturally. Sometimes when we allow people to see things from a different perspective and kind of bring out their own inner coach and challenge things, that's a natural progression that will happen because people start to be more inquisitive. Yeah. But if we set the boundaries at the beginning that says we are looking for some overriding themes as we can grow the business as a whole, nothing personal will be shared. Yeah. Especially if it's more difficult if it's just one person you're coaching within the organisation. It's kind of clear where that message is coming from.
I wonder where that's come from. Yeah.
But also when we do some of the exercises, especially if it's around personal development, we might interview several people through the business to see what they think of a certain person, because they might have an issue around how they're perceived within the business. We get a lot of people that are very talented but aren't very socially aware of the impact that they're creating as well. We'll interview different people throughout the business. Yeah. So then I can utilise that to maybe make some suggestions about how the business or the culture within it is creating or not creating the right environment.
Yeah. You mentioned there, and I'm going to have to move on from it, but you mentioned there when coaching gets into consultancy, and I've got the opposite way around. We do consultancy, which often blends into coaching. I think that's probably another discussion as to how to handle that, because it's very hard to to not try and help people, but actually you realise now this isn't really around consultancy or business advice. This is getting much more personal, and we're not qualified for that. But still, you try and help people where you can. But there's all these grey lines and red lines you've got to be aware of, and these boundaries you talked about.
That is a whole different world that we're entering into. But I think it is also important. When I first started, I wasn't quite adapted to that area. So I would hear something, and in my head, I'm going, I know the answer to this. Oh, I've done this. Yeah. I know I can help them, and I would tell them, and they would go, "This is brilliant, Dave. Thanks. This is amazing." We'd all walk away happy, but the reality is they haven't learned anything. I haven't actually helped them. I've stuck a plaster over something, but we don't know why it happened. We don't know what they were thinking about when it happened. We don't know why it's got to that position, and they don't know the steps to put into play to understand the outcomes. So we haven't really helped at all. And I think
you helped on another dimension. You haven't helped their coaching journey and their personal development, maybe, but you fixed a problem. That's what consultants get paid for, right? So there's still value in it. It's just not the value you've been engaged to provide.
Yeah, and I think that's the reflective part of coaching as well. As a coach and individuals, when we look back and reflect on what we can do differently, it's those elements that allow us to be critical, to allow us to develop.
Yeah. No, fair enough then. Okay, now if I were to ask you what are the benefits of coaching and mentoring, there's going to be a set that I bet most listeners could probably guess at anyway. You know, the gratitude for being picked to do it, the self-confidence, maybe a bit more aware, blah, blah, blah. But what, in your experience, maybe are some of the less predictable benefits that come out of either you yourself deciding to take it on, or perhaps more importantly, you've chosen one of your team to undergo it? What things that might listeners be interested to hear that beyond the obvious can come out of this?
I think beyond the obvious comes the personal side of things. I think actually the amount of people that will come back and say that I've helped within their marriage or their partnership or actually their relationship with their children, whatever that might be, because they've learned a little bit around what active listening is, and they've learned how to control emotion, or they might learn how to look at things from a different perspective other than the one of our own. And instead of looking outwards to blame, they're now looking inwards more to understand how they've affected that situation or how they might deal with things in a different manner. Actually, it really does. I know we always say business and personal should be. It can't be. We're in both of them, and we're the main character of both of those sides. So,
the same person, right?
Yeah. And in the whole we are. I think still people put the shield on and the suit and whatever that might be to be the person they need to be at work, to then be the person they need to be at home. But actually those lines blur less. So one of those side effects is actually it spills out into their home life because they've started to think around things from a different way.
Okay, I can see how that could then in turn benefit their work life as well, if the things are more stable at home. Any other examples then of where in the work the manager might be surprised at something else changing, other than, as say, just someone feeling as if they've got somewhere to let off steam or whatever?
Well, I think it's the snowball effect. So actually when you start having that coaching and that people see the benefit of it, what generally happens when we all come to work, we talk about things. We talk about the weekend, what's gone on. We genuinely, and I'll be interested to know what the little chat in the office here is, because it's always fascinating for me. We do like as an office culture to moan about a scenario or a situation, and actually we find that lessens because someone will come in from a different perspective and they've started to empower the other people to think how they've thought, because people want to share things. So I was told something the other day around the environment, and I was told a rubbish cart full of plastic goes into the ocean every second. Well, that kind of information is something that I then share with other people. And this happens when people are being coached as well. They start to impart this on other people. So that ripple effect actually can go through an office and change a culture quite quickly.
Oh, so you're almost coaching the organisation through a point of contact that you have. The benefits of that person listening to you, they then turn around and not quite coach others, but some of the messaging comes out.
Well, yeah, very much so. Again, it comes back to that ego position of where I don't want to put my hand up because of what people might think. If I'm being coached, I want to kind of show people that I've learned something, and this is what I've learned. And so they start to think around how it impacts meetings and how their behaviours impact others around them. So they inadvertently start to become a mentor themselves for others that are there. And I think that we don't know who's watching us within an organisation. And I think you are a mentor to everybody. I think even anybody listening right now, when they think about even the network they have or the teams that they have, someone's looking up to them. Yeah. Positively or negatively. Yeah. And they're learning from you.
And everything you say is amplified, isn't it? Certainly in a position of power. I was always taught that. I used to run factories, 300 people working for you. I was told, be very careful what you say, even off the cuff. off the record comments get amplified hugely when people see it coming out of someone in a position of authority. They attach way too much meaning to it, but nevertheless, that's human nature. So be very, very careful.
How I see you do something is how I think you do everything.
Yeah, it's true. That's all you see, isn't it? Okay, so we've talked about some of the benefits there, both the obvious ones and some of the ripple knock-on, less obvious benefits. Clearly, it's not all rosy. Sometimes things go wrong. What are the dangers? What are the disbenefits and the risks?
Putting the wrong coach with the wrong coachee is a real, and as you've talked about, going through the motion of just you're getting coached and not being able to set the scenes right at the beginning means that people can almost use it as a weapon sometimes. Right, okay. Well, actually, I've been coached, and my coach said is, so again, talking around taking things out of context, you have to be really careful about the power of words, even though words only equate to 7% of communication in whole. But you have to be really careful what's being said, because you can be used from both sides. I had an example recently where I was 3 sessions in with somebody. They had quite a lot of issues going on with regards to how people perceived them in the office and the impact. They couldn't see the impact around them. They thought that they were very good at what they were doing. They had some really good sales results, and the team around them were great, and they just needed to pull their socks up. That wasn't necessarily the case, and we did something that was called the Johari window, which was allowing them to see other people's perspectives of them. I met their line manager who had engaged me in the first place in the corridor, and he said, "Oh, how's it going?" I said, "Yep, we're making some progress, and we're starting to see some really good development." He said, "That's lucky, because you're his last opportunity, and you've got 3 sessions, and if I don't see a marked improvement within then, we're getting rid of him. But I can now." And I was like, "Hold on, I'm being played here," and I had been brought in as their window of, well, we tried everything, even coaching, and it was a tick box. So it was not a scenario that was set up to succeed, which is unfortunate. And I have a supervision, and I went to my supervisor and said, to look at it as perspective from another angle, and they said, well, you can either back away from this, or you can utilise those 3 sessions to try and make an impact of a positive nature. So we continued. I didn't mention it to the person I was coaching. They did get let go at the end, but actually I got a letter back from them afterwards saying, actually, due to the sessions, they found a role that they were much more comfortable within, and they'd taken some of the lessons from it into that new environment. So I think setting where it goes negatively sometimes is when you try something, it doesn't work. Well, that doesn't work. Well, that didn't work, because it might not be bringing in the right person for the right reasons, or everyone's different.
So how many times have you decided after starting a coaching agreement to call it a day and suggest a different coach might be better suited?
I'd say about a third.
Not as many as that.
I'd say about a third, and it was unfortunate in some respects, is that when you get referred in by somebody, they want to work with you because you worked with so and so, and they said that you were fantastic, and great, but that's them. You
were fantastic for them.
Exactly. And there was a rapport, or there was an understanding, and we think we could work really well. But in my mind, I know a lot of great coaches as well, and I'm looking at the person in front of me and going, whilst this is good, I know you'll get a better experience with somebody else, because I think they're the better link.
You rely on your network, and others in your profession do the same, so that if ever you find that you're not the best match, you've got a pretty good guess of who else might be based on what you then learned.
Yeah. Do you find that with clients from your side? Do you do the same thing? Is that similar there?
Interestingly, not as much. No, I think maybe it's more self-selected beforehand. I think we probably wouldn't get engaged if we didn't have that chemistry. The way we get engaged, I suppose, is less... I don't know, maybe it's not. It's probably very similar in some respects. But if I'm going to pitch our services as a non-exec, for example, or as chairman of the board, which is the work we do, to a new company, then in that very first conversation, or if it ever goes into 2 meetings, the second one as well, you're establishing whether you have a rapport or not with that business owner. And if you can't build a level of trust and respect both ways, then you wouldn't have the second or third meeting anyway, and it just wouldn't proceed. So I don't ever get into the point where I'm starting to deliver the service and then finding, look, this just isn't working. Clearly you're not listening to what I say, or you're not giving me the space to do what I do. I wouldn't have got there, I don't think. I wouldn't have been allowed to get there if that hadn't have been. So maybe it's just a difference in the way we're engaged sometimes, I'm not sure. But it's funny enough, I've never had that experience where I've got in somewhere and I thought, this just isn't going to work because we're a bad match. Now, we have sacked clients before, that old phrase, where we found out about things within that client that we just don't want to be associated with, certain business practices or whatever, then, we hold our morals quite high about that sort of thing. So when it's been like that.
And that's difficult from a coaching perspective, because if you sit opposite me and you share something that I don't necessarily my morals and someone might not agree with, that's irrelevant because that's not what we're here for.
Right. So you have to put up with that.
Not just put up with it, but actually not react to it, not engage with it, not let it affect what I'm talking around. Because that's hard. It's the most extremely hard part of that coaching is doing nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well.
Listening.
Yeah.
Listening to understand and not listening to respond.
It's not your opinions that count in that situation.
No, and I used to open up, and when I used to introduce myself, and I used to say, as my wife will tell you, my opinion doesn't matter. It broke the ice. It's not true completely, so I've stopped using it, but actually it broke the ice. But it's true. It's not about my opinion or what I would do or my views. So sometimes we're talking about things that someone might be sitting opposite me and I'm dealing with something similar personally, but I have to detach from that and not have any bias that creeps in towards how I respond from an emotive position, because that's not what I'm here for. That's not my role. So I have to just push all of that to one side.
Yeah, it can be hard. When asked earlier about the sort of disbenefits and disadvantages, it brought to mind an example just over a year ago where we provided some coaching externally for one of our members of staff who ended up leaving. And it was a sort, in retrospect, maybe shouldn't have been as surprising as it was at the time, but it was around career coaching and professional development and so on. And what happened through the process of about 6 months worth of meetings is that the self-confidence of the individual being coached grew and grew and grew to the point where she realised that she was probably not in the best job for her for different reasons, and was able then to articulate that through action and find another job and move on. And everyone's happy and we still talk and all that sort of thing. But I spoke to the coach afterwards and said, how often does that happen? You know, you've come in to not fix a problem, but to help somebody fit in the organisation and progress the way they wanted to. And actually what they found was that they wanted to be in a different organisation. You know, and she said, well, it does happen remarkably, you know, more than you'd imagine. And I wondered, do you have the similar sorts of experience?
Absolutely. And I see it as a real positive, but I also see it around setting the scene to the start for the wider business. To understand if you're kind of, it's that matrix open, you know, what pill are you taking, you know, kind of thing. A lot of people have got into their roles, they've been pigeonholed into, I've gone to uni, I've gone to college, this is what I've now gone to do. They may have gone through a graduate program and this is what I do now. Yeah. And if there isn't any coaching or any intervention, they'll probably carry on doing that. Yeah. But sometimes through questioning and through allowing people to see things from a different perspective, people start to, oh, that's interesting. So my passion, you say. Yeah. Just do what I'm good at, because not necessarily we end up being in the job of doing the thing that we're good at. Yeah.
So I'm allowed to do that. I have agency. Oh wow.
and sometimes it's just not knowing what is out there as well. So I always say to around the businesses themselves, create an environment that people can grow within. Yeah. But also, if you do lose somebody along the way, then you've got an opportunity then to learn and bring somebody in that's better suited. Because in reality, if they think there's a better role out there for them, then they're not the best person for the role that you currently have. So you can then, through selection, strengthen the team that you have around you.
So the commissioning manager has to at least be aware that whilst there's a very good chance that person will develop and grow and be more fitted and contributing in that organisation and get more from it themselves, it could also be that you find that they're not in the right place for their reasons or yours or whatever.
Yeah, and that's why even right at the beginning we're asking those questions then around what is it that you're looking to coach, or why are you looking to bring in a coach to develop your team? What's the outcomes that you're looking for? Sometimes people just go, well, I just want better results. I want people to work harder. I want people to be quicker at what they're doing. And we have to, again, set the boundaries with the business as well as with the individual to talk around what is, one, possible and not. Two, put in some KPIs and markers in place to monitor what good looks like. Because it's not overnight. You can't teach somebody to be a better communicator, but that might not come up for 6 months. Yep. They might not get an opportunity. So how and what markers are we putting in play to see if it works or not, but also what that end outcome is. And is the business ready? So sometimes the coaching will come in, they'll maybe start with a workshop, or they'll look at setting the scenes. People like to do a values-based workshop and then go, oh, how do we keep these going? Because I've spent some money and put them on the wall, and we've got them in the canteen, and I did this printout, and they dust it off. I've got some values. And they go, well, how do you live by them? How do you bring that in? And then they try and enforce that without people understanding why there's the values in there.
And properly live by them.
And also what the benefits of them are. And I think that's one of the great things with coaching is understanding the outcomes of what you're trying to achieve. So you're trying to do this because, and that because bit gets missed out. So we're just trying to do this. Why? Stop asking questions. Or I haven't got time. We live in a world where we haven't got time to stop. I've lived in cultures where asking questions were negatives. why are you, you're so annoying. Why do you always ask questions? Because I'm trying to understand. But they've got another project going on, or they've got a deadline to meet, or there's something else. We get very caught up in our day-to-day. And even as individuals, we don't necessarily take time to step back. Just pause, reflect, look around, see what's actually true, rather than what our mind tells us, because our mind's not very kind to us.
That's interesting, quite a psychological element to it all. I want to close by asking your opinion on mastermind groups, something that I've taken advantage of over the last 15 years, and I know that Ruth, who chairs our group, and Sarah and Kathy and James and Andrew will probably be listening to this. That's my mastermind group of 5 or 6 of us. We've been keeping it going for, say, many, many years, meet once a quarter, and it's kind of a cooperative coaching / mentoring group, a self-help for all CEOs, all running our own very different businesses. And we will just share our challenges and our ambitions and our business plans. And because we know each other so well, we're able to really challenge that on a long-term thing. But we don't have somebody trained to be a coach or a mentor in that group. We're all amateurs at it, but all in a similar position. Do you think that's all very well and good as it stands, but it's not a replacement for real coaching? Or is that something that can be equivalent in some circumstances and people perhaps could explore as an alternative?
I think people could definitely explore it as an alternative, and maybe even a stepping stone into it. And whilst I use the word stepping stone loosely, because I think that stepping stones aren't a path or a goal, but actually it's an entrance into it. And I think there's an air of vulnerability within that. You're sharing stuff. The book I gift most of my clients is Tim Ferriss's Tribe of Mentors, because there's so many different perspectives in there that you can listen from and learn from, rather than just one voice. So whilst coaching is fantastic, and it's all about getting the right coach and ensuring they're asking questions more than telling you what they're going to achieve, I think that being able to share and listen to other people's opinions is, because one person's isn't necessarily the right opinion. And what I might say to you, I might say from a place of love and support and kindness, but it's not the right thing that you need to hear. But 3 or 4 people's opinions is fantastic. So I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, they'll all be listening.
Well, keep doing it.
Check. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's enjoyable anyway. It's good to have that group of friends to help challenge you. And you need people that can be very honest with you, don't you? Whoever
Do you find that because you have that group, you start looking for questions to bring to the group?
Oh, for sure, yeah. You go into the meeting very much with a mindset of how can I help others in this meeting? But clearly the expectation from them is you're bringing along some real life situations at the moment, some maybe challenges you've got in your own world. And the one thing that really gets them all going is if you come along one meeting and say, I've got nothing to talk about from my point of view this time, everything's going okay, they know that's the trigger, right, we're going to find something, and they dig in, and they often do.
That in itself is the biggest win for anybody there when you're looking at doing that, because you start to look for things. And when you start to look for things, you find things.
Yeah. That's good. It's about being honest about it all, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Dave, that's been fantastic tour de force, really, on the whole coaching, mentoring thing. And I hope some people listening are now inspired to at least look into it a bit more closely, especially if they're in that tribe that thinks it's maybe a sign of weakness or something that shouldn't be done. It's definitely, I'm sure opinions are generally changing and more people are coming across to accept it as a valid management decision to take and create that culture of mentoring and coaching. So thank you very much for introducing us to the subject.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope it's definitely helped people on the path.
That's great. Well, thank you as well for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. That was episode 99. No prizes for guessing what's coming up next. As ever, please share all our episodes and the ones that interest you specifically to your business colleagues. Mention it to them in the pub, or subscribe on YouTube, or listen on the various podcast platforms that you listen to. Thanks again. And in the meantime, good luck with your business.